ready for you. You're watching 23 News, now at 5.
As we move closer to planting season, many farmers worry the fluctuating temperatures this winter could affect their yield when it's time to harvest.
The University of Illinois offers some tools that could help ease those nerves. 23 News reporter Jake Pearson talks to climate specialists about ways farmers can take advantage of this weather roller coaster.
Through a series of 3 Climate Tool workshops, the University of Illinois Extension keeps farmers and students up to date with the newest agriculture technology to get the most out of the harvest season.
So we can get a good picture of not only where we are at those locations, but like compared to where we normally are this time of the year, where we've been before.
Winter weather in Illinois has taken residents on a ride, with February breaking the record for its warmest month on record.
We have to look at that long-term trend, and it's never going to be straight up or straight down. It's always going to be this variation. So what we have to do is stretch that time frame out so we see what those ups and downs are doing. Are they trending up or are they trending down?
And when 70-degree days occur during the last few weeks of winter, farmers may come out of their winter hibernation a bit early.
It depends on if you're growing an annual crop or a perennial crop. For the perennial crops, of course, they're in the ground all the time. They're responding to those soil temperatures. A lot of our perennial crops are breaking buds. They're hitting different phenological stages, maybe even bloom in some isolated cases.
Trent Ford is the state climatologist for Illinois. Although warmer temperatures may tempt or even force some farmers to plant early, colder temperatures in spring could kill any progress of a head start.
It's normal. It's not even abnormal. It's normal to get our last spring freeze sometime in the latter half of April, if not the first few days of May. So what that means is that with perennials being well ahead, in some cases a month ahead of normal, it will put them, I should say, at an increased risk of spring freeze damage.
When it comes to annual crops, Ford says the temperature outside doesn't matter as much as the soil temperature. If the soil is warmer, it also means it's drier, incentivizing an early planting season.
Thank you, Jake. And although the climate specialists come to inform farmers and students of their findings,
they also say it's important to receive feedback from area farmers to better understand the northern region of Illinois and its trends.